In this part, I talk with Julia Martin from episode 4, who was previously a food scientist at Hoxton Farms. Welcome back, Julia, to the Cultivating Careers in Alternative Proteins podcast. I am extremely excited to have you back on the show.
Hi, Jeff. Oh, the pleasure is so as much mine as yours. It really has been a while, but I'm really glad to be speaking to you again.
Yeah, I think last time we spoke, I was maybe a little over 3 years ago, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, over 3 years ago for sure.
Wow, time flies, eh? All right, so really, what have you been up to since then? Tell us the story.
I think that the last time that I spoke, I was still working in the cultivated meat space. That was until about 2 years and a bit ago. So what happened after that is that I wanted to get a bit away from the startup environment, not for any particular reason. I think that being in a startup and especially being back there in the 2021, 2022 in the alternative protein space was extremely exciting. But I thought I wanted back then to get a bit more involved into the investment side. And I wanted to do that for a mission aligned organization. And I think I found my fit very well at the ProVeg Incubator. And at the ProVeg Incubator, I was program manager and I was also scientific lead, doing all the scientific diligences for all of our not only incubator program, but also our investments that we were doing independently. And it was very, very exciting to be on the other side of the table. And from there, I became really interested in the areas of corporate partnerships. So, how these innovations get taken up by corporations or large manufacturers or retailers. And then, obviously, the policy dimension of this. And thus, I was for a year and a half after that, the cellular agriculture lead for ProVeg International, which was really an eye-opening experience in terms of really becoming exposed and understanding that food systems are really a very complex structure. And they go really beyond just innovating on a product or on a brand, but they're really, really entailing just so many layers of stakeholders and so many layers of different dependencies. And after a year and a half in this role, I recently have landed in a new focus, which is working on more mainstream sustainability, focusing on food companies. And the reason for which I took this career step was because in that same journey of discovering this complexity within the food systems, I realized that sustainability is really still a developing field in itself, and that supply chains are really the next frontier for sustainable proteins as innovations and companies. So this is what I've been up to for the past 3 years almost.
Wow, that's quite a lot of changes that you've gone through over those 3 years. I imagine you've learned a lot during that time. So, would you mind sharing some lessons that you've learned along the way?
First of all, I think it's really not all about the tech. I think that early on, I overestimated the force of tech and the force of consumer demand. And I really underestimated the imbalance of power that are really in the organizations and the companies that are really producing the food, and then the politics that are involved in this. In the hands of the politics and these very complex dynamics between consumers and manufacturers and retailers and innovators, I think I also underestimated really heavily the power of communications and the power of media. I think I've become aware that food is so intrinsically embedded within society via values and beliefs and identities. Despite the fact that I do think that these identities or habits or customs can change in time as new generations grow and age, I do think that because there is this very strong link to values and identities, food is really a fertile ground to divide people and society via culture wars and just create polarization. I have seen this over the past couple of years with the entire ultra processed foods culture war and how it's just every day. I don't know if this happens to you as well, but there is just the salad of facts and misinformation left and right that is actually really driving a lot of not only consumer choices, but I think also larger scale decisions in how food is produced and food is marketized. So I think that this was also something that's taken shape in my mind over the last 2, 3 years. And finally, I think that sustainable proteins, protein diversification space has really grown into this beautiful, strong, pleasing community of people that are very, very mission driven, and they're very smart and they want to change things. And I think that once you are been in a while in this community, you feel a true sense of belonging. But precisely because at least I felt I was part of this very strong community, I also lost track of where to go next. And it makes it harder to continue innovating and identifying the next frontier of where to keep pushing for the mission when you are afraid to stray from what everybody else in your community is doing. Therefore, it was really a hard process for me to say, okay, I want to get involved in supply chains. I want to get involved in sustainability. I want to get involved in science-based evidence for food system sustainability, even when there wasn't that many people in my community in protein diversification doing that. So most of the folks around me were very involved in the cell-based space, or very much into the innovation or the sensory dimension of innovation. It was a hard process to look elsewhere and take that leap. So I think there's also that lesson, and to put it shortly, be afraid of becoming too comfortable in finding a great community. I think that for many years, that was part of the reason for which I made that first career change of going from the biomedical industry into the food, which was like, oh, I want to feel part of something larger. I want to be with people. But after a few years, I've also realized that that was perhaps not the best source of inspiration to keep pushing for my mission and to keep pushing for the space. So we need to keep some independent thinking, I would say.
I get that. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess using that type of thinking, how do you feel that's going to direct your future, and where do you see yourself in the next few years?
So I used to have this very long-term thinking before, and it was always with this expectation of I'm going to be here in 5 years, I'm going to do that in 5 years, I'm going to accomplish this for the space in 5 years. I am embracing a lot more the feeling rather than the idea that I need to keep on doing what I think is the most effective and impactful at that given moment, and I might realize it down the way. For example, right now, I know that I want to be in supply chains. I want to be in compliance. I want to be standing and helping manufacturers and retailers and big corporations to really make the food systems the most sustainable, ideally including protein diversification within that. But perhaps in this journey, I will also realize in a few years down the line that the next step is in this other place. I do have to say that I do know inside of me, I'm very interested in science and engineering, in technology, in entrepreneurship. For once trained as a scientist, you'll forever be a scientist. And the way my brain is wired due to education, to experiences, really makes me realize where my passion and my expertise really are. I know in the very long-term future, perhaps there will be also a space for that to come back. However, as I just mentioned before, I think now my path is in working with corporates, in helping draw those sustainable transition agendas, and hopefully incorporating very effectively protein diversification. I'm very happy I found this perfect fit in this firm called Free Keel. And I'm just really happy I'm learning a great deal about wider picture sustainability, about what the priorities look like for large manufacturers, and really understanding what is moving the needle in terms of regulations and how are food companies prioritizing to comply and to have more ambitious and better commitments. So I'm excited about what I'm doing now. I know there are other parts of my profile that I'm excited about, but they will come back probably later on in my career.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm so happy that you've found something that you feel is better aligned with your values and your skill set where you are now. And is there anything else you want to add or discuss or talk about?
Yes, precisely because of I mentioned before about the media and the comms. There's a few folks out there that are thinking, like, oh no, times have changed. The sustainable proteins industry is not growing as fast as it used to be. And I want to invite everybody that is worried about that, or is that seeing this or thinking from this dimension, is that no, I think that the problem or the opportunity is that the next step for sustainable proteins is elsewhere. Precisely 5 years ago, it was in the tech, it was in the science, it was in the bench. And I think now is perhaps more in policy, perhaps more in supply chains, and really getting and helping corporates to get those sustainable proteins down the line. I am personally so excited for somebody to take on a formal role in studying misinformation around sustainable proteins online. I know there's some folks out there studying misinformation for climate facts, and I would like to see this exact same research and effort being done in food and nutrition. So I think this is the next frontier. It's not that sustainable proteins or protein diversification is stale or slowing down or decreasing or it was a trend. It's just like, guys, the problems are elsewhere. So you got to think outside of the box and say, okay, how do I continue championing for this in the most effective way with the situation that we have today, which is not the one that was there 5 years ago. So that's the most important message I would like to throw out there for the folks that are doubting about their career choices or doubting about getting into sustainable proteins. The challenges are elsewhere. They're there for you to get and grasp, but they're not obvious.
Yeah, I think that is definitely huge and underexplored areas, misinformation for alternative proteins. I think they get a bad rep for being considered ultra-processed foods, and I don't think people truly appreciate what that really means.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you also read on the media like, oh, ultra-processed foods are bad. And I always end up drilling to like, well, what is processing if it's not heating, right? Like, do we have the clinical trials showing that these glycated proteins are bad for cells? It's so empty of fundament and it's so empty of science. And the debate is so big and it has just gotten into so many ramifications. I just really want a networks computer scientist or a complex scientist to grab all of these trends of misinformation around plant-based foods and really put the facts out there. I really think that there is regulation that needs to be enforced a lot more, not only for food misinformation, but across the board. But I would love for somebody to start this research somewhere.
Fair enough. I think it's an important message to get across. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure, Julia, and thank you for speaking with me again, and I wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, I love your podcast. I've been seeing that you have interviewed so many people that I admire over the past year. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.